Thank you very much. Right, so what I'm going to talk about this afternoon is what's happened since my book on butterflies of Hertfordshire and Middlesex was published in 2016. This is obviously one of the things, whenever you put something into print, it's fine at the time you put it into print, but soon after, and especially with the way things change in the natural world at the moment, we find there's been quite a few changes. So I want to outline some of those. But first of all, a little bit of background. So there's the book, which hopefully you're all familiar, you all own and treasure a copy. So that was published in 2016 and included records for butterflies in both Hertfordshire and Middlesex up to the end of the year 2015. And since then, each year Butterfly Conservation's Hertfordshire and Middlesex branch publishes an annual update, which you can see is quite an attractive full colour brochure, which is sent to all members of the Butterfly Conservation branch that covers our area. And it also goes to about 150 other people, conservation organisations, local authorities, landowners, etc., who have an interest in looking after or can help with butterflies, and that's available to anyone else. A few months after publication, it's actually put up onto the Butterfly Conservation website, so you can have a look at it there. But members actually get a print version of it, which is, and we'd always try and get that end of February after the year, so that it's available for people to know what's gone on, so that it can inform any recording you do in the next year. So let's have a look at what's happened in Hertfordshire. Just a few points I wanted to make here of the change since the book was published. And some of these I'll be touching upon when I actually talk about some of the individual species and the changes within there. But I thought this was quite a useful summary of some of the things which to me seem to have affected the way that we look and record butterflies. Some of them positive, some of them negative, some of them providing opportunities. So obviously more people around means A, more pressure on land and resources, but also means possibly more people to actually record butterflies. So looking at the positive side, obviously there's lots of pressure on development in a county like Hertfordshire. But again, there could be opportunities there where previously unattractive or unavailable sites actually become available, and there can be mitigation provided which can actually encourage butterflies. We've got the extension of Hertwood Forest, which has turned into an extremely good site for butterflies within Hertfordshire, easily accessible being in the centre of the county, and indeed it's probably the best site. Now if you want to see the Purple Emperor in Hertfordshire, Hertwood Forest is the place to go, rather than Broxbourne Woods, which always used to be considered the peak place. Butterfly World closed. You know, some of us have mixed feelings about that, but it does have relevance to one of the species that I'll be talking about in a minute. Citizen science I'll also be touching on again a bit more in a moment or two. COVID-19 obviously had some advantages and some disadvantages. It got a lot more people out into the countryside, and we got many more records during 2020, during the lockdown, and luckily that trend, if not the amount we got in that year, actually increased. So COVID actually did something good for recording, because people actually started looking around their local area instead of going much wider. And also, through butterfly conservation, we've actually had a lot more engagement over the last few years with landowners and farmers, which means that we've been able to influence, hopefully influence at least, some of the things that they're doing on their land. And it also means that we've been able to get onto land which we haven't necessarily been able to survey previously. And again, with a couple of the species that I'll be talking about, that could be quite significant. So, how has recording changed? Well, paper records have declined significantly, which actually makes my life much easier, because one of the things I used to find was, particularly October, November, December, all I was sitting doing was transcribing lots and lots of paper records into Excel spreadsheets and databases and so on, getting RSI, And it was quite interesting. You actually put you very close to the records that were coming in, but I must admit there were more interesting things I could be doing. I still have a few people who correspond by paper, and which is all very welcome. Some people aren't on IT, don't wish to use IT, so I get very nice handwritten letters from several correspondents still, and that all goes into the mix. But I must admit, the fact that it can all fit into a little paper sheath like that rather than into a big archive box is very welcome. So how's recording changed? Well, app-based recording, as I'm sure other people have found in their particular areas, has proved invaluable. We've got iRecord itself, which obviously you can record anything in. We've got iRecord Butterflies, which is really Butterfly Conservation's version of this, which is actually aimed very much at just butterflies, and I think you can record a few day-flying moths in there as well. And they're the British schemes, and they work very well. We get thousands of records that way. I and a recently appointed verification assistant go through these records on a daily basis, in fact, verifying or querying records. And it's a great thing getting records in real time, which we didn't used to get before. So you can actually query something when people can hopefully remember what it was that they saw, rather than waiting 6 months till you get in a bit of paper. Say, oh, I don't really remember what happened there. Too many things going on. Then we've got iNaturalist, which also is an American system, but quite a few people do like using it, and those records also come in through iRecord. And we also get records fed into iRecord through BTO's Bird Track app. So we get quite a few records from bird watchers as well on various sites, and that all goes into the mix. And it's very good to be able to get all these sources of information. And we still get all the records that we've previously got from things like the UK BMS Transect, Wider Countryside Butterfly Scheme, and one or two other schemes that Butterfly Conservation run. So what I want to do is now go through about a dozen species where there has been something significant happening. I'm not going to plough through all 39 Hertfordshire species, so we'll pick out some highlights and unfortunately some lowlights, and one or two other interesting bits and pieces in the next few minutes of my presentation. So the first one I want to mention is the brown hair streak, and you may notice that this is the map just for Hertfordshire, as all the other species are. It's actually a map that covers Hertfordshire and Middlesex. And this is significant because in about 2016, just after the book was published, when I'd been fairly dubious about whether we'd ever record the brown hair streak in Hertfordshire again, first records of brown hair streak, having ventured from a spread that they were making across Surrey, actually appeared right down in Hampton in the southwest of Middlesex, right down near the River Thames. And that was very exciting. We kept the site secret because we didn't know was this going to be something really special, but perhaps might have only been a one-off, for instance. But as you can see from the dots on the map there, it has spread across a lot of Middlesex, so North London basically, particularly on the western side, and each year there have been more and more records. And the butterflies illustrated there on the right-hand side, it's quite attractive. It's the last butterfly that begins flying in the year, doesn't fly till late July, will come down to flowers, can spend quite a lot of time high up in trees, but does come down to flowers perhaps more than some of the other hair streaks. But the main way of recording it, unlike most butterflies, is not through the adults, it's actually through sighting the eggs. And you can see a close-up of an egg on the top there, and also a typical position of where they're laid on blackthorn, basically, but other prunus species as well. The lucky thing is that obviously blackthorn is not a rare plant, and on a cold, dark day where there's no leaves on the blackthorn, these eggs can stand out quite well. So this is why this is the preferred way of recording it. Now, it's gradually spread across North London, Middlesex, and 2024, well, the end of 2023 and then into 2024 was the first time it actually crept over the border into Hertfordshire, which is the good news. And it was recorded at Merry Hill near Bushy, the Woodland Trust site, which I'm sure some of you know. Eggs were recorded there in the winter, and then some adults were seen in the summer. I actually went down there in the summer and failed to locate any, but they were there. I was just unlucky. Let's face it, there were a lot of unlucky days for recording butterflies and other wildlife, particularly invertebrates, during this summer. The good news is that in the last week, a lot of eggs have also been found at a site called Prestwick Road Fields in South Oxley. So again, right down on the border with Middlesex, but it is obviously pushing its way north, particularly on the west side of the county. So if any of you are based in the sort of Watford, Oxley, Bushy, Rickmansworth sort of area down there, it's well worth going out. This is just the time of the year to start doing it, when, as I say, the trees are bare of leaves. You want to look particularly on younger growth, particularly the growth that's suckering away from the main hedge. They can be found, the eggs can be found on more mature plants, but particularly on that sucker growth. The books all say they're found between 1 and 2 metres above the ground, and that's certainly where we've found them, but then where's our eyesight? It's between 1 and 2 metres off the ground, so they may well lay eggs in other places as well. But certainly the number of eggs that's being seen both in North London and now just over the border into Hertfordshire makes us very confident that this is going to be spreading across the whole county perhaps over the next 10 years. Because let's face it, Hertfordshire has got plenty of blackthorn. So this is really good news, positive news, and nothing bad about this at all. Especially as the brown hair streak in 1 or 2 other counties where it has been found does seem to be in decline. But this northward spread is a good sign. Maybe it's to do with good old global warming, I don't know. And the other good thing to say is that it is just as likely to be found in urban areas where there may be relict hedgerows of blackthorn that have been kept in suburban development or in scrubby fields. So it doesn't necessarily need nature reserves or anything like that. It can survive very well in more urbanised areas. For instance, if you go to somewhere like Oxford, where there are quite big populations within the suburban Oxford, so there's no reason why it shouldn't spread into our towns as well. And I've certainly seen them flying around suburban Worthing down in Sussex, so they're not frightened of people. So this one is rather more controversial. This is the Adonis blue. Now, the Adonis blue was well established in the 1940s on Thurfield Heath, and it died out. What the reasons for that could be maintenance of the chalk grassland. It has very, very specific needs for quite short grass. There's a general decline in that species, but anyway, it was gone, and there's no reason to think it's coming back. And then we started getting reports in August 2019 up on Churchill, photographs sent in. This is an Adonis blue, isn't it? And yeah, it's pretty unmistakable because it's a blue unlike any other blue butterfly. It's an iridescent electric blue, and the white borders of the wings have the black checker mark. There's no other blue quite like it. It's an absolutely stunning butterfly. Now, how it got there, we don't know. We think it was, to use the jargon, an unauthorised release, probably of pupae, but we don't know. But whoever did it knew what they were doing. They released it in the most likely place. And it has to be said, we were a bit, should we be talking about this? But now, 5 years later, it has spread over the whole of Thurfield Heath, and you can see from the 2 maps there, up there, the distribution maps. So 2016 to 2019, a couple of sites, a couple of tetrads at Thurfield Heath. Go down to the most recent years, 2020 to 2023, you can see there's a lot more dots. And there is also 1 dot further away, and that's because it has also been recorded in small numbers on the land where chalk from the development of the Baldock bypass, from the tunnelling onto the Western Hills, was dumped at the east end beyond Clothall Common, which is actually now a very good butterfly site for all sorts of species, and it has been seen there in small numbers. You can see how it went from a very small, if you look at the graph, you can see it started off very small and it's shot up and it's fallen back a bit. These graphs of abundance, which is based on the transects that are walked on Thurfield Heath, just cover the last few years, obviously, for this species. So there's a trend line there which shows it's up, but it has gone down slightly up to 2023, and the numbers haven't been so great in 2024 either. But clearly it is established there now. For how long, we don't know. We don't know how genetically variable or otherwise the colony might be. We'll have to wait and see. But it's interesting it's there, and it'd be silly just because it's an introduction to ignore it when it's been established now for quite a few years. So we move on to another interesting one, the Duke of Burgundy. This is a rare butterfly across the whole of the UK. It's well known from sites in Buckinghamshire, just outside Hertfordshire, so places like Pitstone Hill, Ivinghoe Beacon, for instance. And in 2021, after years of it not being recorded, it was actually recorded 4 times at Albury Knowers, which obviously joins onto those sites just to the south and obviously just in Hertfordshire. There were just 4 single records. Some of them were definitely different butterflies, but there may not have been as many as 4 individuals. But this is a butterfly which likes chalk grassland, but it also likes there to be an amount of scrub, and it also likes there to be cowslips and primroses, which are its larger food plants, in particular situations and in particular sizes. If it just relied on cowslips and primroses, it wouldn't be a rare butterfly. But it has extremely exacting tastes, and those tastes and needs actually go against the management of a lot of chalk grassland and many other species. So it is not an easy species to get established. And unfortunately, since 2021, there have been no further records at Albury Knowers. Now, whether there was something in 2021 about the weather which meant that it just dispersed more, we don't know. Clearly, it failed to breed. We don't even know the gender of the particular Duke of Burgundies that we're seeing. For instance, they're all males, and it does tend to be males that move first. If there is a dissipation from a site, then obviously you're not necessarily going to get breeding. But we remain hopeful. We have worked with the Wildlife Trust to look at the requirements of the Duke of Burgundy and see if they can be met. This is particularly at the north end of the reserve, where we have the very, very steep chalk slope down to rather more damp conditions. But unfortunately, nothing so far has worked. But at least we did get the Duke of Burgundy back onto the Hertfordshire list since the book was published, which is something. And yeah, there's always the hope that in future years we may be able to persuade a few more over the border, sufficient that they actually start breeding. And then the small blue. Now this is Britain's smallest butterfly. It's far smaller than any of the other blues, which are already pretty small butterflies. This reappeared in the county, really, at Butterfly World, which is why I mentioned it, its closure, because we had a transect, and some of you will be aware, a transect is a very well-controlled survey on a particular site, looking at butterfly numbers over that period. And of course, Butterfly World closed, and that obviously took away our ability to really get some good comparable numbers for the actual abundance, which is why there isn't an abundance chart on this slide. But we do have the distribution, and you can see the distribution for the 5 years or 4 years before the book was published are over there on the top left, and then we've got the 4 years after it was published, top right, and the 4 years since, going up to the end of 2023 at the bottom there. And you can see that the actual distribution has increased over those 4 periods. That's good news. And the small blue is now quite well distributed in areas, basically chalky areas where kidney vetch grows. And the great thing is about kidney vetch is it's been included in a lot of wildflower mixtures and marginal mixtures which farmers have been planting increasingly over the last few years. If you notice up at the top of the current map, There are a whole load of dots in the Royston area where previously there wasn't a great deal. And we've worked with various farmers up there, particularly to seed more kidney vetch, and that seems to have worked. There are a number of farmers who are very enthusiastic, and landowners who are very enthusiastic about getting and keeping the small blue onto their site, and that's been reflected in the numbers that we were recording. It's also another butterfly which, after many years, has actually managed to proceed up the Bulldog bypass from the sites at Letchworth, where it was found re-established a few years ago. They've actually got up to that Clothall Common site, and they now definitely breed on the kidney vetch that was growing on that site. So we're hopeful that there's going to be a continued expansion for the small blue, which is a delightful little butterfly. And I noticed that the County Council actually seeded a bank of kidney vetch when they rebuilt the A602 up near Tunnel, which isn't exactly an obvious chalky area, but there was lots of it in flower and in seed this year. Didn't see any small blues, obviously. As for so many species, this wasn't a great year for it. But we have noticed that despite the book saying the small blue is a very, very sedentary species, it does seem to be able to sniff out kidney vetch quite well. And so you never know, we might get a central Hertfordshire colony, though whether that kidney vetch will establish itself, I don't know. Because kidney vetch likes chalk, it likes bare soil, it likes a lack of competition. And I have a feeling in central or eastern Hertfordshire there might be too much competition for it on soils which may contain a relatively low proportion of chalk. But we hope. So this has never been a rare species, but the reason I include it here is because it's on the last red list for butterflies, put it on its watch list because there did seem to have been a decline. And if you look at the abundance graph at the bottom there, you can see, and I put a vertical blue line on there because that shows when the book was published and where the records went up to. You can see it did look as if it was in decline. This is again based on standardised counts across transects. But since the book was published, it obviously, something about the book obviously persuaded it should do something about itself, and its status has gone up and up and up for a few years. It then fell back a bit, but it was going back up again up to the end of 2023. And I think 2024, from all the reports I've had and from what I've seen personally, this has been one of the few butterflies that seems to have benefited from the weather that we've had in 2024. There have been a lot of reports, and I don't have any great worries about this. It has several broods in the year, and every brood through the year there have been good numbers reported, unlike one or two other species which started off well in the spring but then plummeted when it came to their summer or autumn broods. And you can see it's not just the numbers that have gone up with an increasing abundance trend line. You can see that the number of dots, the number of tetrads on the map for Hertfordshire is also increasing. What's particularly pleasing is there do seem to be more dots in North East Hertfordshire in the good old arable desert. So again, we hope this is down to better planting and seeding of flower and grass mixtures in margins of the more intensively farmed areas, which is encouraging it. And certainly it's great to see this attractive little butterfly, which never opens its wings at rest, which is why all the photos that we've got here show it with its wings closed. So they're all positive things. So just about that, I always like to include the brimstone because this is the butterfly which seems to have the least change of any butterfly year on year. You can see it goes up and down a bit in abundance, but you can see the red dotted line there is almost a horizontal line. You can see that the dots on the map stay the same, and so just to show that not every butterfly species is in danger. Some of them just seem to plough on, just carry on, whatever the weather conditions, whatever the climatic conditions. So that's brimstone, and then I want to include the red admiral because this shows the effect of migration. It's basically a migrant butterfly from Europe. More and more actually manage to spend the winter here, but it's still a pretty small proportion. You've only got to look at the numbers that are seen in February, March, early April to realise that it's a fairly small proportion of the population actually hibernates. If you get a year like 2023, where you get a big migration, you can see how the abundance numbers do spike up. This year, it's been relatively abundant. I haven't got 2024 on any of these charts because I haven't been able to crunch all the data yet for this year. But you can see that it did have a particularly good year in 2023. Indeed, there were quite a lot of media reports. Butterfly Conservation put out press releases about it. I had a few words to say on 3 Counties Radio about its sudden increase. And you can see it goes up and down, but it's quite a significant increase in 2023. And this is what happens with the migrant species. It happened with the cloudy yellow in about 2000. It happened with the painted lady, memorably, in 2009. So that's, if you like, the good news. So let's go on to the bad news. Small tortoiseshell. Now, the distribution maps here don't show a great deal of change. There's perhaps a few more gaps in the most recent down at the bottom right-hand end there, but it's still pretty good coverage. But look at the abundance chart on the bottom left-hand side, and you see we've got some problems. Round about the time the book was published, it was at its peak. The abundance there was pretty high, and then with 1 or 2 blips, it's actually gone down and down and down, up to the end of 2023. And I think it's fair to say that 2024 has been an absolutely terrible year for what is always regarded as one of the common garden butterflies, found throughout Hertfordshire, throughout the country, north to south, east to west. I've had several people say to me this year, I haven't seen a small tortoiseshell. I'm going out, looking at butterflies on a very frequent basis, walking 2 transects. I haven't seen recorded a small tortoiseshell on either of my butterfly transects. I have seen across the whole country 2 small tortoiseshells this year. That's all. And I know other people have had similar observations. Coupled with the continued decline, we've got to ask why. And it's difficult to know. A few years ago, and you can see there's a dip right at the 2011-2012 bit of the abundance chart, there was a feeling that there was a parasite called Sturmia bella that was causing the problems that had established itself in the country from Europe. But it seemed to recover very quickly after that, seemed to find an equilibrium. But that didn't last for very long. And so it's unlikely that it's parasitism now, I think. One of the things that has been noticed is that small tortoiseshell always used to keep flying right through to the autumn and would only go into hibernation round about October. The last few years, people who have had them hibernating in their sheds have noticed that they're going into hibernation in July, early August, just like the peacock does as a standard thing. Whether they are actually built to have the fat reserves to last that long through the winter so that not many of them actually make it is a question. And with lowering numbers anyway flying, and if that may be one reason, parasitism added to that could be another reason. We don't know exactly what's going on, but certainly very few emerged from hibernation compared to the number that went into hibernation this year. So that's worrying. I really don't know what's going to happen in 2025. The common blue, unfortunately, is becoming the not so common blue. Its numbers are thinning out. You can see there's a particular gap in central Hertfordshire in the most recent years. Numbers, again, went up to a peak and they've dropped back, and they certainly haven't improved this year either. And it wasn't doing terribly well before that 2 or 3 years when there did seem to be a recovery. One of the things with butterflies that it's difficult to draw long-term conclusions even from this sort of 15 years of data, because they are very susceptible to weather conditions. many other things, but obviously like many invertebrates, especially ones like the common blue, which have a couple of broods a year, they can be very easily affected by short-term conditions. But we are worried about the longer-term trends for the common blue, which again, as the name suggests, should be a common butterfly of pretty well any grassland area, parkland as well, coming into gardens. Now this is one of our rarer species, the grizzled skipper. And just look at that abundance trend line on the at the bottom there. You can see how low the numbers have got. And again, this is on transects. There are only a few sites for the grizzled skipper, but we are lucky that the main chalkland site at Albury Knowers and two of the brownfield sites, which they favour at Waterford Heath, all have transects on them, so we do actually have some quite good abundance data. And you can see it's not looking good. You can also see the distribution has changed a bit. We've lost, for instance, it seems we've lost the colony that used to be around Welling Tunnels. That's the two orange vertical marks on the top right-hand map. We know it's gone down over the last couple of years in numbers at Waterford Heath and Frogmore Pit. The reasons for this, partly management, partly weather. We think one of the problems at Frogmore is the actual water table there of the lake at Frogmore has gone up a tremendous amount. This may have something to do with less water abstraction, for instance, at some of the pumping stations down the Beam Valley. In butterfly conservation, we've actually got a project where we're working with a lot of the landowners and so on, Wildlife Trust, Heidelberg, Hanson, Lafarge, Tarmac Lafarge, Woodhall Park, to try and get these sites into as good a condition as possible. But it is proving difficult, and I don't know. We hope it will recover. It also doesn't seem to be doing terribly well at the chalkland site at Albury Knowers, as you can see from the maps. It's not so widespread as it was. So this year we actually recorded a lot of eggs on agrimony. Partly we know they're on agrimony because it's much easier to plant to examine than wild strawberry, which is always put as the main plant because that grows so low to the ground. But we didn't see a lot of larvae emerging. The white admiral woodland butterfly, you can see again how the distribution of this has thinned out, particularly in the Broxbourne Woods, Bulls Wood area of East Hertfordshire. It's also been lost from quite a few central Hertfordshire sites like Simons Hyde Wood. The only place where it does seem to be increasing is Whippendale Woods, right down in Watford, where we are getting more records. But again, there are more people looking there, so that may just be recorded effect. But you can see the numbers have gone right down. Already had a meeting with the Wildlife Trust up at Bullswood this year to discuss any management interventions that might benefit the white admiral. Unfortunately, it does seem to be in decline across the whole country, or the whole of southern England, because it's only found in the south. And it may be that there's something wider again that's affecting it, but we just don't know. There's so much we just don't know about butterflies, despite the fact that they're probably some of the most familiar insects around. And finally, of the declining species, the chalk-hill blue. You can see that when the book was published, again we've got that vertical blue line, you can see that the book was published at a particular high point for the chalk-hill blue. The numbers were great, and you can see on that map, which reflects the 4 years up to the book, there were lots of yellow dots, well away from the chalky areas, which as its name suggests it likes. So away from Albury Knowers, away from Thurfield Heath, away from Hexton Chalk Pit. And they were the peak years when the sites couldn't contain the number of butterflies that were emerging. And so, again, all males were dispersing to other, much more, in some cases, very unlikely sites. Since then, there's been no dispersal. You can see the numbers have dropped right off. Slight increase in the last couple of years, which we're optimistic about. But the numbers at Thurfield Heath this year were down. The numbers at Hexton Chalk Pit were down, according to our surveys. There's just one private site I know of where the numbers seem to stay just about the same. But again, we're concerned about this because this is one of the iconic Hertfordshire butterflies. It used to be the place where the collectors went to collect all the aberrations. For many years we didn't record any aberrations up there, but this year I was able to see this female, which you can see has quite a few blue scales on the hind wing, and that is one of the known aberrations of the chalk-hill blue. Why that should have turned up this year, I don't know. But it is worrying that, and also I think there had been a colony established at Ashwell Quarry, but there were none recorded there this year. It is another butterfly which has actually, though, established a good colony at that site near Clothall Common. So that's another good place to go and see it if you don't want to go all the way up to Royston. So that's a very brief summary of what's happened since the book was published, just picking out some significant things. So thanks very much for listening, and I'll finish it there. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm conscious of time, but I'm also conscious that there may be the odd question. So if there's any quick questions for Andrew.
Andrew, you said about the Adonis blue, suspected to be an unauthorised introduction.
Yes.
Do you know where, what you do, the next nearest natural site is to Royston?
Oh gosh, now you're asking. It's a long way away.
Right.
I can't think off the top of my head, but it's not close by.
So more evidence to it not being a natural colonisation.
Yes, yeah. It's unlikely to have been natural spread. Yeah.
What is this food plant? I didn't notice.
Oh, sorry, yeah, horseshoe vetch. Yeah.
Alex, did I hear you?
Yeah, I was curious about the grizzled skipper trend. The sites that you were mentioning, they're kind of early successional, aren't they?
That's right.
So you'd expect a certain amount of change happening on the site as part of its kind of management, good management.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that we're actually seeing a limitation in the survey methodology if you're walking the same transect every year? Normally that's quite effective, but that could be the instance where it's working against you a little bit.
Well, yeah, I take that point, and that can certainly be the case. But because we've got this project looking at particularly the Bean Valley area, we're actually visiting, and that's completely separate from the transect. So myself and Liz Goodyear, who I know a lot of you will be familiar with, we spend a lot of time visiting places like Frogmore, which don't have any formal surveying, looking at other parts of Waterford, looking, as I said, at Rickney's Quarry with permission from the landowners there, and working with Woodhall Park. So we know, I think we've identified most of the sites. So we're actually looking beyond the set routes.
Yeah.
So, and we know that there is still good habitat, or theoretically good habitat there with bare ground, with plenty of the food plants like agrimony and wild strawberry, which is what they like, on bare ground, not being overshadowed by scrub and so on. So yeah, I take your point, Alex, but I think we can be pretty certain that it's unfortunately more than just a survey error, if you like.
Okay. Any final questions? Sorry.
So you mentioned Clothall Common 3 times, and I know we've corresponded about this, but are you confident that it's that butterflies are related to Clothall Common rather than saying the sloping chalk bare slope next to it?
I think certainly the blues, well certainly the chalk hill blue, yes. I mean, it's difficult to tell with the kidney vetch because there's kidney vetch on the common and there's kidney vetch on the slopes. I get the impression that the behaviour suggests to me that they probably are breeding on the kidney vetch at the bottom near the houses as well as on the slopes, because it took a long time for them to get there. And but for the horseshoe vetch feeding ones like the Adonis blue and the chalk hill blue, I'm sure they are spreading up there. They're just spreading their wings up from the slopes of the actual bypass itself. But in terms of providing somewhere else close to urban areas where people can go and see these butterflies, obviously it has a value there, perhaps helping to educate people but there is, you know, these rare butterflies can be seen close by them.
Excellent. Andrew, thank you very much. That's really good.